the Point of Order podcast, an inside look at California politics and the state legislature. I am your host, Assemblyman Josh Hoover, and I'm joined once again today by my team, Sara and Enrique. How are you guys doing today?
Great to be back.
Good. Awesome.
Yeah.
Are we recovering from Valentine's Day? Did you guys go big on Valentine's Day and President's Day? Man, so many great days the last few days.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What are your guys' opinions / thoughts on what do you guys do for Valentine's Day?
Yeah. You know, it's funny. Growing up, I wasn't really into it. I mean, I was younger, of course. But you would think that you're more excited as you're kind of growing up and kind of new to the dating scene. This year I kind of just had a nice dinner, kind of stayed low key, but I think it's a neat holiday.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I did not have dinner on Valentine's Day. I was actually, my wife had plans on Valentine's Day. So
oh wow, okay.
She was like, "Hey, I'm not available," and I was like, "Cool." So then I called Greg Wallace, our assembly colleague, who also didn't have his wife up here because she was down in the district, and so we went out to a very lovely dinner together. It was nice.
Yeah. What'd you have for dinner?
We ate at Cafeteria 15L. It was all right.
Nice.
It was really, we just had to find somewhere we could get in with a bar because there's no way you're getting a table there, right? Like
busy day to have dinner.
Very difficult.
As long as you have the bar there, you should be
Exactly.
Yeah. I feel like I had a different experience. I feel like when I was younger, I really enjoyed Valentine's Day because in classrooms you hand out like goodies to each other.
Yeah. Right.
And you'd walk around to everyone's desk, and that was really fun. And, you know, it was more so about like me and my friends just, you know, celebrating each other than Valentine's Day. And now that I'm in a relationship and have been in one for quite a while, we don't really do much, to be honest. I think part of that is our anniversary happens to be 2 days after Valentine's.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah. So our anniversary
really nice.
is a little bit more important than Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Plus, it's way easier to get a reservation or something 2 days after.
2 days after.
Exactly.
Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point.
We're normally
honestly,
pretty
if you don't
low-key.
think about it like a month or 3 months in advance, it's like you're not getting anything. So
Yeah, and that's the thing. You know, if you go out, you just know that everybody's going to be out for the same reason, on the same page. So
not my favorite night to go out. I'm not like overly anti-Valentine's Day, but I definitely I don't know.
Yeah,
there are people who are.
Oh, I know.
Very
There's
anti-Valentine's
very
Day.
Anti-Valentine's Day people. I'm kind of neutral on the subject, but I just, no, my wife and I ended up going out on Friday on your anniversary.
Yeah.
So,
that's really nice.
I didn't even go out on my anniversary. We finally made it out Saturday night.
Nice.
So we kind
All
of did a weekend celebration.
Very cool.
But I feel like that's the trick. If you're going to celebrate, just don't go on Valentine's Day.
Oh, yeah,
you know,
exactly.
go a few days after something.
A few days before, a few days after.
Yeah.
It's about the occasion and the vibe.
This was a lot less controversial than I had hoped. I was really hoping for some anger towards this holiday, but none of us really have it. So.
No hard stands.
Well, hey, let's jump into our weekly recap. There's a lot to talk about. I was just going to do a little rundown of some of the big stories. The first one, here, not my favorite story of the week, but, it's kind of interesting. So it's about how legislators have requested 1,100 reports on how California's laws are working. So we'll pass a bill, and within that bill, it'll say like, this agency has to report back to the legislature on, the progress of this legislation at some point. It's a way to, put some accountability in some of the legislation that we passed. Well, unfortunately, for the accountability side of that, this new report by CalMatter says that more than 70% of the over 1,100 reports that we've requested are past due or have not been reported back to the legislature. So not a great track record there. We got like 30% that are actually being done. So and really there hasn't been a lot of follow-up from the legislative side on that. So I mean, even our office, I mean, this isn't a bill per se or a report per se, but we passed an audit of homelessness spending last year. It was supposed to be back by the end of 2023, and we're now February 2024, and still going to probably be waiting a couple more months for that. It's kind of a bummer, and I think it's definitely not great for accountability. So.
I think the number's kind of up there, and one of the I read in the article, one of the biggest effects that has, the lack of reports, is that a lot of bills can be duplicative or can be introduced more than once. And last episode we spoke about the number of bills that can be introduced in the legislature, and we see one reason of that.
Well, I think that's the thing, and that's my concern with it, is like it's almost like this, like, oh, they're we're gonna hear back about this, we're gonna hold people accountable for this legislation. A lot of times it gets put into legislation that we're not really sure that we want to pass. And then someone's like, well, we'll do a report, and that'll make it better. But if the reports aren't even getting done, I mean, it's just,
or somebody may be intending to draft the bill for a certain issue, and they may be waiting for a report, and thus they don't have the full information to have the best bill for that issue.
Exactly.
It's very interesting. It's a high number.
Yeah. So one of my topics that I like to discuss sometimes. So there's this new article out in the LA Times about EV sales being down. While I log into my LA Times account, what do you guys think of the EV issue?
I don't know. I mean, that's not something. I have never been overly passionate about EVs. I think it's been interesting to see just driving down the road. I know we talked about this last time. I have quite the commute, so I do a lot of driving these days, and just seeing the influx of EVs on the road and through various brands and different car dealers and such. So just seeing the way the market is moving with that sort of in person has been really interesting to follow, for sure.
I don't drive an EV. It's interesting to I didn't have a subscription to the LA Times, so I wasn't able to dive through that one. But I'd be interested to hear what the biggest reason has been as to the decline.
Yeah. So Sarah, you probably spend a lot of money on gas then.
Yes.
For your commute. It's like
I do.
Yeah, and you have that big hill. That's crazy.
Yeah. I sometimes get out of it by using my mom's car because my mom has an EV.
Oh, there you go.
And they have,
so you've driven one.
Yes, and they have a plug-in at home. So if
what does she drive, if I may ask?
It's a Chevy Bolt, I believe.
Oh, the Chevy Bolt.
Because isn't there a Volt?
The Volt is the hybrid, but the Bolt is the
it's small,
pure electric. It's very small.
Yeah, very small. So she has a Chevy Bolt. She's had it for a while now. Nice. I wouldn't say that it's my type of car. I like to drive a little bit of an SUV. I like to be sitting, a little bit up and can see the road pretty well.
Oh yeah.
But it's really nice to drive for carpool.
I've driven a Bolt. I rented a Bolt down in Southern California once, and it's definitely very small.
It's very small.
But it is that entry level electric, like EV, right? So the cost of it up front is quite a bit lower than your kind of larger electrics, right? So you can get one for probably around $30,000 versus like a lot of the newer EVs with the longer range and stuff are in the like $40,000 to probably $50,000 range, which is a lot of money for a car, right?
Yeah, maybe looking at the Bolt if I ever want to get an EV. I will say I've driven an EV twice, and on both occasions it was yours. It was the Assemblyman's car to a tour that I drove to in the Bay Area.
I was just gonna say, I was like, Dad, you've driven mine twice. So that's
very smooth, I will say.
So I am the apparently the only EV driver here.
Yeah.
So that's fun. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting story, right? So they talk about there's currently 1.4 million electric vehicles on the roads in California. EVs make up 20.1% of all new car sales. At one point, there was one year where that actually hit 25% for a year. But certainly the market is slowing down on them now. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, I think there's, I think the technology is still unfamiliar to a lot of people. There are still honestly limitations. I think that the newer technology is far better than what it has been.
Sure.
Other than maybe Tesla, but every other EV produced before like 2021. I think definitely the range was very low. There was just not a lot of reasons to purchase an EV.
Sure.
But the technology has come a long way. But I like the LA Times kind of goes through some of the reasons for the recent drop in EV sales. Number one, they talk about undependable chargers. I think this is a huge problem. Like if you, particularly if you're not a homeowner, like if you own a home and you install a charging station, which is pretty easy to do and not insanely expensive to do, if you're able to do that, you have a very smooth ownership experience because you're just charging when you park at home every night. But if you're an apartment owner or just someone that doesn't have a charging station at their house, it's a very different situation, right? Because you have to find a public charger, generally a fast charger that you're not going to, you can't park somewhere for 8 hours at a time, right? So, so, and those are limited. Like they're either limited, you got to wait in a line sometimes, not always, but sometimes, or they're broken. I mean, there's a lot of hassles when it comes to charging, and I did it for about a year without buying a home charger. And some days it's great, 20-30 minutes, you're done, you're good, and other days you're waiting, you're you're stressing.
It can also be so unpredictable, and I don't need to be an EV owner to know like the difference that it would make having your own charger. And say if somebody does live in an apartment complex that does have charger stations, well, it's going to be unpredictable who's going to be using it, or you're going to have to strategize.
That's the thing is you either need a home charger, right, or you need to have like a consistent plan to charge at work.
Exactly.
Right, and if you don't have one of those, I get why people might not jump to purchasing an EV. Right,
and with the plan, it's probably stress you don't need trying to who's out there using it.
Yeah. So the other reason is high prices. This is true. I mean, I think I mentioned, I think the average retail price for an EV is now $55,000. Wow. So that's even more than what I said. Compared with $48,000 across other vehicles, which both of those sound very high, to be honest with you.
They do.
I feel like there's a lot of vehicles you can buy for less than those amounts. But certainly the case, a lot of the higher range EVs are definitely more expensive. So the upfront cost is more. And then I think the part that kind of is included in that and is their third reason for potentially for sales going down is confusing incentives. And I think this is so true. Like it's really confusing now. Like I think there was like a federal bill that passed a few months ago that changed all the federal incentives for EV purchases. And it's a very complicated, if you're someone like me who likes to plan out like what this is going to cost me. So when I bought an EV, right, I literally penciled out every scenario and compared it to the car that I had currently owned, the gas-powered car.
Yeah, for sure.
And it was like upfront cost, is that cost going to kind of pencil out with the incentives? Is the day-to-day cost going to pencil out compared to the, and I ultimately penciled it out where it was like, it's way cheaper for me at least to own an EV when it comes to saving on gas prices and all those things. And with the incentives, the upfront cost wasn't that bad. But it's a very complicated equation to write out. So,
and really the more confusing and complicated it gets, the less that people will want to make that leap to try it out.
Yeah,
I think people just view it as a very complicated space, right? It's like I know how to fill up a gas car. I know how those work. I don't need to relearn anything.
Yeah.
And so there is definitely, I think, a gap there for sure.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
And you had all those early adopters that are now like, they've got their EVs. So now I think you're starting to see it tail off a little bit. Yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see, I mean, the governor and to a degree the legislature is really counting on EVs to get us to our climate goals.
Sure are.
I mean, our state wants to phase out gas powered vehicles by 2035, which I am strong. I'm opposed to, not because I don't like EVs, but because I just don't think that we have the infrastructure available And I think we need to allow people to make those choices for themselves and not mandate that choice. But certainly, I think that is, everyone's counting on EVs, who's pushing to phase out gas-powered vehicles. I just don't see it. I don't see it being realistic at this point in time.
Yeah. I appreciate the effort of where the state wants to go with such technology. And it is very sophisticated technology. And can't say that I'm an expert or I'm too knowledgeable about it, but you know, I think it also invites calls to be realistic as far as like where the effort is going.
Yeah. And I think discretion, you know, to the individual consumer is important because it's not just the monetary cost, it's also the time and energy cost, the information cost. I mean, as you mentioned, you know, for that, what was it, a year prior to you having a charger at home? Yeah. I mean, that's a big lifestyle change for some people, especially if they aren't near a charger. Maybe they're more rural. You know, you don't know someone's, you know, circumstances. So I think that's a big reason that even now people are hesitant because it's not just that initial cost. It's how is it going to change their lifestyle? Does it fit into their lifestyle? You know, all those additional questions.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say on a positive note for people that are like, I don't know, like I've been thinking about an EV, but I'm not sure. I love my EV.
Yeah.
I love it very much, but I also acknowledge where it doesn't, you know, get the job done, right? Like, but overall, like for a day-to-day, like just commuter vehicle, my wife and I just like constantly are swapping vehicles because we've got one gas and one EV, and it has saved us like hundreds of dollars a month.
Wow.
Just because like, you know, she'll be like, are you using your car? And I'm taking your car. And then like I take it to the Capitol every day. So it's just like, it is a game changer in terms of there are ways that it can save you money for sure.
Yeah.
But it has limitations, right? And like, I'm not going to, like, if you want to drive it to LA, it's going to be a little bit more complicated, right? Because you're going to have to map out all your charging stations.
Yes.
I think I drove it to Paso Robles last year, and it was fun. It was interesting. So that was the first time I had ever done it where I couldn't get somewhere on a full charge. And, it definitely creates more challenges. So it's interesting.
But what I'm thinking is, say, even in a scenario where hypothetically that effort is realistic to 2035, I'm thinking there may still be a sector of the population who still wants to have like a gas powered car, whether it's like classic or something.
For sure,
you know, and I wonder how the state may want to mitigate.
Yeah,
that.
I mean, the way the requirement works right now is it's for new cars produced right after 2035. So they're not technically saying that you got to get rid of your gas powered car, but I think even from a cost standpoint, right, just an upfront cost standpoint, it's going to be really difficult for a lot of families to afford the cost of an electric vehicle. And there's really not another technology out there that's affordable that you can buy, right, to get yourself to and from your place of work or to your kids to school or whatever it is. So I think we're really jumping the gun on that for sure.
It's very interesting.
Next story here. So there was a report that came out that one of my colleagues commented on. It was a new report from the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice that basically was criticizing the amount of money that has gone to law enforcement over the last few years, and the clearance rate that they've had for arrests and solving crimes and things like that. So I had a colleague, one of my assembly colleagues, came out and this is what he said. I'll just read it. He said, "I would push back on the notion that public safety is the number one issue on people's minds. It's not." This is in response to this report. If we provide economic opportunity and the resources for people to thrive and live their lives, we wouldn't see rampant theft. And he also said that, "I promise you, if 10 teenagers walk into a Gucci store and start stealing stuff, it's already a felony." I actually disagree with him on that. I think it depends on how much you steal. So I thought it was an interesting response. So there was a number of legislators that came out and argued that there's a lot bigger issues than crime going on in California right now. I will say, just from my district standpoint, what I hear about the most when I talk to constituents is crime, is homelessness, and is affordability, right? And but crime is absolutely at the top of that list. And so I think it's a really interesting to have all of this kind of being reacted to right now when we're in the midst of, and we're going to talk about it a little later, like we have a bipartisan push to really crack down on retail theft in California. So I definitely would say that I'm not in agreement with my colleague on this one. I think we need to continue to fund law enforcement, but we also need to really give them more tools. Like, we've taken away so many tools. And so this report's criticizing them for not, making enough arrests or, clearing enough crimes. But it's like, we've made it impossible, or very difficult, I should say, to prosecute actual crime in California because of the policies that we've passed and because of Prop 47.
I think the issues that your constituents suggest, they're overlapping onto one another and cause a negative feedback loop onto one another. I think I read on that particular article that the clearance rate for Sacramento specifically is 5%, I believe. I think I read that. And it's sometimes ironic, when you're walking to your car or you're walking in front of the Capitol and you see a smat or a break-in somebody's car, like right in front of the Capitol, it kind of puts that into perspective.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's been crazy these last, even the last year on the Capitol, the press corps has been posting, like, they'll do a press conference at the Capitol and they'll come back and their windows are smashed and their cameras are gone. I mean, this is something that's literally happening to everyone around the Capitol. We've had like 2 stabbings, right, in the last couple weeks around the Capitol. I mean, it's been, that's awful. And I think it's led to, and this is obviously a downtown Sacramento, right, where we spend most of our time. But it's certainly the case in a number of large cities across the state.
Yeah. I'd suggest crime is a little up there.
Yeah, I was gonna I'm trying to find the law enforcement's reaction to this report. Brian Marvell of the Peace Officers Research Association said in an email that at first glance, the report seems to be missing some important context when it comes to crime clearance rates. He said it misses the number of sworn officers in the state, as well below 1990s levels. So this is actually something I've talked to my local PD about, is we actually have fewer officers on the streets than we did in the 90s and even 10 years ago. And then also about how Californians' attitudes towards police have soured over recent years.
Yeah, that's a reality.
How that's had a massive impact on the police's ability to deter or solve crimes. And so, yeah, I mean, I think those are good points as well. But
I agree.
I mean, a lot of the cities represented by the people that are, kind of citing this report are really unsafe cities, Oakland, Los Angeles, I mean, here in Sacramento, right? So it's just really, I would not say that if you asked your average Californian, kind of person on the street interview and you said, do you feel safer today than you did 10 years ago, right, in your community? I'm not sure that they would say yes for the most part.
I don't think I do, personally.
Yeah.
No.
And I'll just briefly clarify that 5% that I mentioned was for property crimes in particular in Sacramento.
Sara, do you feel safer today than you did
10
years ago?
Oh, I thought you were going to say in like the 1900s. I was like, I wasn't around then. No, I don't. I mean, I mean, when I'm obviously a younger female, when I'm walking around or driving around, I'm really attentive to what I see. And if I see something that seems at least a little suspicious, I mean, I will do a 180 in my car and drive the other way, even if it's adding 10 minutes to my commute.
Right.
Because you learn that you can get yourself into situations, and because of the increase in crime and what's going on, you might not be able to get yourself out of that situation.
For sure.
And it seems a little counterintuitive to sort of criticize law enforcement and their work while also removing the tools that allow them to do their work. So, it doesn't quite add up to me.
Yeah.
But
no, I agree. I think we have some amazing, obviously, law enforcement that kind of are posted around here a lot, and yet we've still seen some of these things happening. What has been like the staff reaction to some? Because I heard that staff has gotten the emails about the like recent stabbings and and kind of scary stuff that's been happening around the Capitol. What has been like the staff response to that? Like, I mean, is there like more?
First, I can appreciate that the legislature, or if there's a network to get the news across to the people around the Capitol and the legislature in particular. I don't know. I think it just for one, it makes us talk about it. So there's that. But
for sure, yeah.
But
buddy system.
Depends where you're going and at what time.
That's true. Yeah.
I moved to, this isn't the only reason, but I did move to a closer parking garage.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So not for, not that that's the only reason, but someone told me about a closer parking garage that happens to be a little bit less expensive, all good things. But I was kind of going back and forth because this parking garage can have its own little issues. Okay. But it is so much closer to where I was parking.
So it minimizes the exposure to any potential problems.
Yeah. And it's a little bit better now because it's staying lighter later. But when it was getting dark so early, I was, walking back to my car a couple blocks by myself. Yeah. And there's not, I'm one thing I'm very surprised by, there's not a ton of lighting around the Capitol. The Capitol itself is a little lit up at night.
It is very dark over there.
It's very dark and along the sidewalks in front of the Capitol.
That's a really good point, actually. And there used to be it was still dark, but now we have all the construction on the what is it, the east side of the Capitol, the back side of the Capitol. So there's really just that one part you can really walk in now. But it is really dark. Whenever I walk down here at night, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So
it's a little dim.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
That would have been a great transition, but we're not going to that story next day. But about it being light longer, because we are going to talk about daylight saving time. But, but before we get there, last story I wanted to mention. So there's this big thing going on in Los Angeles Unified School Districts over charter schools. And I just wanted to give it a mention because I actually think this is a pretty big deal, but they have a 7-member school board down there. It has regularly been the focal point of a lot of political battles, millions of dollars in campaign spending to shift it towards a pro teachers union board versus a pro charter school board, and it has just been this constant battle. Pretty recently, the teachers union side took about a 4-person majority on the board, and so they recently passed a policy that is going to be essentially saying that charter schools cannot use public school facilities where they're currently housed. So they're kicking out, I'm trying to remember the percentage here, but they're kicking out a large percentage of the charter schools that are currently using their facilities. This is going to have a tremendous direct impact on a lot of kids in Los Angeles overnight, because basically they're not going to be allowed to go to their school where they've used to been going. But really in the long term, it's also going to create a lot of challenges for, I think, charter school offerings in Los Angeles as a whole. Now, I don't represent Los Angeles, but I do sit on the education committee, and I think this is kind of just this growing trend is to really push back and be anti-charter school in California. We have seen this at the legislative level. We've seen this at the local level in a number of situations. Okay, so here's the number. So about 21 charter schools will be immediately affected, forcing them to find new facilities. If you know anything about finding facilities for educational offerings, it's very difficult. This is probably one of the biggest challenges charter schools face, is actually finding a facility to offer a program in.
Right.
But that's nearly half of the district's 52 charter schools. that share campuses and serve. That's going to impact roughly 11,000 students. And so really unfortunate to see. I mean, obviously, LA is kind of a hotbed of this fight, but it's just kind of a continuing battle in California over, should parents have options on where to send their kids? We obviously care a lot about making sure our traditional public schools are well funded and, operating at the highest level possible. But the reality is that they are failing in a lot of ways and in a lot of communities across California. And parents need other options and have sought out other options. I think this decision and this new policy is really going to hurt a lot of families that really don't have any other choice but to go back to a school that is not offering their kids what they need. And I think that is that's really hard to hear. So
I think it's very well said. I'll be tuned into that.
Yeah.
See how developments.
Did they cite their reasons for doing that?
There's a lot of quotes in here on why they chose to do. I'm trying to find, because the superintendent made a statement that was, to be honest with you, I feel like said a lot of nothing. But it wasn't the superintendent that was pushing this. It was a number of board members. But the superintendent's statement was, this is one of those situations that no matter what, we're going to have some people dissatisfied on either side. I believe that what has been presented may, in many ways, alleviate some of the issues. However, we need to be vigilant and honest about unintended consequences of well-intentioned policies. I mean, honestly, that is like the most PC, right?
A bit of a non-answer.
It's like trying to literally touch every side of the argument.
Right.
So I didn't really love that quote. I thought that was, just very, kind of a non-answer. I know that some of the people pushing for this, I think what they would say is that, charter schools threaten funding for traditional public schools. And, my response to that is always that, this is the most important thing about our education system is that we're offering high quality education. And the reality is, and I've seen it firsthand as a former member of a school board, is that when a charter school comes into a community, so often the traditional public schools up their game because they know now that they have to offer something that is going to keep students at their school.
Absolutely.
It really is this driver of innovation that I think is really important for all of the schools in the district, right? Because all of a sudden people start getting creative and people start, attacking and finding solutions to, getting literacy rates up and helping kids better in different academic subjects. So the Charter Schools Association responded by saying the new policy is going to damage children who, would traditionally benefit from enrolling in a charter school. In the worst case scenario, of course, this is a quote, the schools are literally evicted from campuses. And we'll end on this and then we'll move to our looking ahead segment. But what I would add is that if you are a person or a family with means, right, then you by default have school choice because you can either purchase a home or move to a neighborhood with fantastic traditional public schools, or you can, potentially afford tuition at a private school or something like that. It's the kids that don't have the means, right, that really have no other choice. They're either, they have to go to the school in their neighborhood, and if it's low performing, they have no other option. Or they can go to a better performing, in some cases, charter public school for free, right? If there is one in their community. And so a lot of times charter schools are literally the only option if you don't have the means to get yourself out of that situation. And I think that's a lot of what gets lost in this debate is that, we're talking about families that don't have the means to do something different, right? They don't have the means to do something else. So sadly, I think a lot of those students and families are going to be affected by this.
And just briefly to your point, not only would that provide all parents with additional options, but it will have the effect of, with the little competition, allow our public schools to be a little bit more creative and actually say, what can we do to,
And that's been my experience. Just, I think traditional public schools in a lot of communities, I can't speak for all communities, but like in my community, for example, do a good job for the most part and try very hard. They have a lot of very committed teachers, very committed school board members and administrators. But sometimes, they do need that extra incentive to really up their game. And I think that it creates opportunities for that.
Absolutely.
Right? Which I don't think are a bad thing. Let's jump ahead. So there's, we just passed our, what was it? The bill deadline, right? The bill introduction deadline on Friday.
Correct.
So what was the date of that? I don't even know what Friday was at this point.
16th.
16th.
Yeah.
Okay. You see, you guys, this is why I'm really glad you're here. February 16th was the bill introduction deadline, which basically means that, every bill that has now been introduced, there's not going to be any additional bills. I should have checked on Chris McKayla usually posts like how many bills.
Yeah,
but I haven't seen his email yet.
I haven't either.
I think I watched an interview with Chris middle of last week, and we were already over 2,000, I think, this year. So my guess is we're somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 bills having been introduced this year already, which is, again, pretty crazy. I think last year we debated, or there was 3,000 bills introduced.
Yeah, roughly.
And about 1,000 of those made it to the governor's desk. So, but that being said, there's a lot going on. We introduced a bill last week, AB 2417, my office, along with Assemblymember Joe Patterson, Senator Roger Nilo, and a number of other my colleagues who put forward what we're calling the Beyond Housing measure to not eliminate housing first, but to repeal the requirement that all money spent in California to solve our homelessness crisis has to go to housing first programs. So under current law, any dollars that we spend as a state to solve our homelessness crisis have to go to housing first programs. What's a housing first program? Basically a program that provides housing, but all of these services, mental health, drug, substance abuse treatment, all of that is voluntary. All of that is optional. It can't go to programs that require substance abuse or mental health treatment as a prerequisite for staying in a program, right? And so I think that we have kind of seen the effects of housing first in California since 2018. Homelessness has grown 32% in California. We're now home to 49% of our nation's unsheltered homeless population. And during that same period of time, we've spent over 20 billion taxpayer dollars to solve this problem.
Yeah.
And so just I think this is a really important bill for saying, hey, we need a broader approach. We need a more flexible approach to solving our homelessness crisis, because what we're doing right now is not working. So, Sara, is this your bill? Okay. So how are you feeling about the bill?
Well, I'm a little biased.
Tends to happen.
But I obviously really like it.
Yeah.
To me, it feels a lot like a common sense bill.
Yeah.
It's all about flexibility, giving back discretion, and in line with what we were talking about earlier with the legislative reports, it's about being able to adapt to those reports and our findings. And if the findings show that housing first policies have not been effective, and if the goal is to help those experiencing homelessness, then it should follow that the common sense solution would be to maybe change those policies or at least allow greater flexibility.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. And, ultimately the goal is, as I said, to help people.
Yeah.
So if those reports, if those findings are showing that, we aren't helping people, that the legislature isn't helping people and that's their role, then something different needs to happen. And this bill will help achieve that. At the very least, give them the flexibility to work towards that.
Yeah, and I think that's the frustrating thing about California's current kind of policy is not so much that housing first doesn't work, because there certainly is a segment of the population that it does work for.
Sure.
But it's more of, why would we lock ourselves into a one-size-fits-all approach to solving the homelessness crisis, when I think there's another segment of the population where that's not going to work, right? They're maybe they get into shelter or housing, but they're not going to on their own, kind of seek out, without the proper incentives, seek out treatment or seek out help. And so, we've got some amazing programs in our communities. I know in Folsom we have Powerhouse that's doing a lot of good work. I think we've talked about St. John's Program for Real Change, which is a program in Sacramento County that's really more geared towards women and children dealing with homelessness. Getting them, they actually, St. John's program has a 75% success rate in getting people's lives back on track by getting them out of the cycle of homelessness. And you can't argue with those results. I mean, they're really powerful results, particularly that are helping women and children that are suffering through this in our own community. And so it's hard to say we should invest in this, but not this, right? When you're seeing the results of really positive results, of those programs.
Absolutely. I agree. And just to briefly emphasize, we may feel different about the effort that is Housing First, but our legislation does not disband with that effort. As you say, we're simply just saying that other entities, we have more flexibility, and other entities can provide the help, and they could just provide the help in a way that recognizes the need to rehabilitate from substance abuse that some people may experience more than others.
Yeah, I mean, really, we want to support programs that also emphasize recovery, right? Also emphasize treatment. And I think that's the ultimate goal of the bill. So we will see what the response is from our colleagues over the next few weeks. But I'm excited to move that forward. Another big bill that got introduced this week, it is called the California Retail Theft Reduction Act by Assemblymember McCarty. There's no bill number in this article, so apologies for that. But essentially, there was a press conference where the Speaker of the Assembly, Robert Rivas, participated to kind of, this is the bill that it appears the Speaker is getting behind to address retail theft in California. The one big concern that I have with it is that one of their selling points for the bill is we can pass this and fix the problem without having to deal with Prop 47. I don't know if we can deal with this problem fully without addressing Prop 47. So,
it's the elephant in the room.
definitely concerning. But, I don't know if you guys saw any of that press conference or anything, but
I saw the article, and I may have a different point of view as far as like the role of Prop 47 in our crime rate. I would say it's the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
And I appreciate efforts to resolve, the problem of retail theft, but I think if we don't get at the heart of the issue, we're probably not going to go far with these efforts.
Yeah, I mean, so the Speaker's bill, among a number of things that it does, it creates a new crime targeting professional retail thieves with a penalty of up to 3 years. I think this is getting after that idea of organized retail theft. That's great, but a lot of the retail theft going on is not organized, right? It's literally, one-offs.
It's spontaneous.
That this is not going to apply to. The proposal sets new requirements for retailers to report thefts and reporting requirements for people who resell goods online. So this is trying to get at some of the scams going on online. The bill would says it would provide more tools for law enforcement to make retail theft related arrests, expand the use of pretrial intervention programs, including drug courts, and allow law enforcement agencies to keep repeat offenders in custody. I think I had a bill similar to that last year that, basically said if you commit these crimes multiple times, then, you can be charged with a higher penalty. But, the fact that it is not going to address what I think is one of the root causes, which is Proposition 47. I do have some serious doubts. So the Speaker was asked by Ashley Zavala, who was at the press conference. She's one of the the KCR reporter for KCRA. Let's see, was asked if Proposition 47 also needs changes, and his response was, "We can have that conversation at a later time." So I don't know exactly what that means, but I do know that there is a ballot initiative in the works right now collecting signatures to actually have that conversation, to actually address that directly in November. That if the voters are given a chance, I think the polling shows is very likely they're going to want to have that conversation this year. So hopefully by later time, he means like in the coming weeks. I don't know. Like, I mean, that's later, I guess. That's what I would like to see. It's like, we need to have this conversation this year, right? As soon as possible. And actually, make some real changes to Prop 47. So we'll see what happens.
We shall see what happens.
Next story. So we've got a CEQA exemption proposal. I don't know. Did you guys see this one? I don't even know if it's in the New York Times this week, but
not quite,
or last week. But essentially, one of my Democratic colleagues is proposing a 10-year CEQA exemption for a number of different construction projects in San Francisco only. So this would be limited to kind of with the goal of revitalizing the city. Like I don't love that it's limited to just San Francisco, but he represents San Francisco, so I get it. But I think it's really he is CEQA is often viewed by environmentalists and legislators as kind of the third rail for environmental policy, right? You just don't really touch CEQA. That's generally viewed negatively to a certain group of people. So I am a bit encouraged that, we're having this conversation, or we're going to have this conversation this year, because it's just another, I think CEQA needs much broader reform than this, because it is holding up a lot of, the things that we have to build in California, whether it's housing, whether it's water infrastructure, whether it's, really any sort of infrastructure that we need to build, CEQA tends to be a roadblock. So it'll be interesting how this fares by, introduced by a legislator who is very environmentally friendly, very, connected to the environmental community. I'm really curious to see what happens.
No, I last year, my first session that I worked in the legislature, I had the fortune of staffing not one but two bills dealing with CEQA. I kind of know the basics of it. I can't say that I'm an expert, but I have come to learn how big of an obstacle it can be for simply construction, and even just a mere threat of a lawsuit can not only discourage but cause a developer to dispense with it altogether.
Lawsuits, threats of lawsuits, right? And I think the frustrating thing for a lot of people in California, but also for lawmakers, is in the past we have seen CEQA get waived for certain things like sports arenas, and all of these kind of one-offs for pet projects and stuff like that, but we can't do it for the average like the needs that we have, like building housing, right, or building water infrastructure and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Sure will be.
If the bill is successful, it'll be interesting to see what it goes towards and what's actually built, and who it serves, and if it sort of sets a precedent for serving those same people in other communities. I
agree. Yeah.
Was there any clarification on what type of projects they want exemption for?
Yeah. So I think it was like, I think there were certain types of housing included in that, or certain types of kind of business related construction and stuff for kind of revitalizing downtown. Right.
Okay.
San Francisco. So I think I really want to have, if that gets to the assembly, it's going to come to natural resources where we will see it and get to have that conversation. So I'm super excited for that because I sit on that committee, and
it's a good opportunity.
But it has to get through the Senate first. So that's a lot of hurdles still,
right?
Before it gets to us.
We'll be watching it.
I was curious what your guys' thoughts were on this. 2 California lawmakers want to crack down on kids riding electric bicycles, citing safety concerns. One bill was introduced that would bar anyone under 12 from riding an e-bike and require e-bike riders without a driver's license to take an online safety course, pass a written test, and carry a state-issued ID while riding. That's quite the hurdle. A second bill would set an age threshold of 16 years old for riding a Class 2 e-bike, which uses a throttle to propel the bike up to 20 miles per hour. Have you guys ridden e-bikes?
Maybe once or twice.
Okay.
Maybe once. I've just done the scooters, but
well, I've ridden some around here, I think, or at least you used to be able to rent them. I don't know if you still can.
I see more scooters than bikes. I don't even know if you can rent bikes.
I think that you used to have bikes, and they're like gone now.
Yeah.
I rented them a couple times.
So this would be like your own personal e-bike.
This would just be any e-bike. If you're under 12, you couldn't ride one, and then if you are, and then you'd have to wait till you're 16 to ride a 20 mile per hour one. E-bikes are becoming so prolific though, like they're everywhere now.
Yeah,
I feel like when a lot of people are buying, e-bikes. So
I saw them a lot when I was briefly living in DC. That's where I saw them the most.
Yeah.
But that's a pretty bike friendly city, especially when you're closer to the White House.
Yeah.
But they were often sort of like laying about.
Yeah.
Frequently crashed into stuff and whatnot.
Yeah, so apparently the crash data hit like a 5-year high in 2022.
Oh, really?
And I think that's kind of the result of a lot more of them being on the roads probably.
Yeah.
Well. Yeah. I mean, I get we don't want like a 15-year-old on like basically a motorcycle, driving around. I get that. I think like it depends though on the capability of the e-bike, right? Like if it's just an assist mechanism for hills and stuff, or if it doesn't go more than 20 miles an hour, I mean, I'm not sure the government has to get involved in this.
Yeah, what I'm thinking is, I mean, is there a conversation to be had about, younger kids, maybe an under 12? I'd say maybe, as you say, depending on the circumstances of the bike, because I don't have any children, but if I think, if I were to have, say, an 11 or 12-year-old, I wouldn't want them in basically a motorcycle,
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's a conversation to be had, but I'm always wary about like the demands that the government is.
Well, and I think that's a parental issue, obviously.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I actually heard from, I was going to do a bill this year and I decided against it, at least for now. But I'll tell you guys about it. But you guys know what I'm going to say. But you have to have a driver's license to ride an e-scooter, technically right now. I think that's ridiculous, personally. Some of these e-scooters are not fast, right? They go pretty slow.
Yeah.
And yet, you're going to get a ticket if you don't have a driver's license. To me, that seems way over the top. And so that's kind of where this is kind of moving things in that direction for e-bikes as well, which I just don't really love on its face. I think that, a lot like these are, I think that these are decisions that need to be made at the family level.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily the
I agree
government level,
with that.
but we'll see.
I'm curious if they have, or would it be able to find any data on the ages of people who are in these accidents? And is it actually young people, or is it just that we want to protect young people and therefore they're sort of, wanting to enforce this rule?
Who's going full send out there?
Yeah. Is it the young people or the 30-year-olds?
Well, and to be honest with you, I mean, obviously helmets are, I think that's important that kids should be wearing helmets and all that good stuff. But I'd be interested in the comparison between traditional bicycle crash data and e-bike data.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certainly an argument I'm sure that could be made if your e-bike goes really fast that,
That's
more likely to crash. But
right.
for certain like levels of e-bike, I can't imagine that, they're significantly more unsafe. My youngest crashes his bike, that isn't an e-bike. So, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, there's always risk involved in getting on a bicycle,
sure is.
right?
Yeah.
Sure is.
Well, we're getting close to the end here, but the last one I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. Okay, so my colleague Trita has introduced a bill along with Senator Roger Nilo, who also represents a portion of my district up here in Sacramento County, to end daylight saving time in California, essentially move California to a all standard time model, which is what Arizona currently does. So they are, what that basically means is that you would be, you would not have to switch your clocks every year, but you would be on standard time. So one of the, I guess, quote unquote, benefits of daylight time is when you shift to daylight time, you get more daylight, right? That's kind of the whole point. So about 8 months of the year right now, California is on daylight time. So this would be moving us to standard time for the entire year, not just the 4 months we currently use it. So things will get dark a little earlier. What do you guys think?
Oh gosh.
This is a very controversial topic.
It sure is. Probably more than Valentine's Day.
I think you're right. Yeah.
I can just say that I'm team when it gets dark later. I like having sunlight out.
So you like the light.
I like the light.
I think I
like
hear
the
that
light.
from a lot of people.
Yeah. So maybe I'd be open to it if we'll keep that for the whole year.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just gotta say that I have a preference for the daylight.
Yeah.
When it's out for longer.
I guess I have the same. I mean, I like when we have daylight later.
Yeah.
Just especially since, working a 9 to 5, it's nice when you get off to have daylight, be able to, go out, spend some time outside and not necessarily for it to be dark. But I also like the idea of standardized time.
Not switching your clocks?
Not switching the clocks. That seems very efficient to me, which I like that. But I feel like I don't know enough about the effects that this would have to have, like, a super well thought out answer.
Yeah, no, I get it. And that's why I was kind of just curious about your
What do you
personal
think?
opinions. The problem is I've looked way too much into this issue.
Okay.
To be honest with you, because I actually used to work for someone that pushed for, a similar change.
Okay.
But I think what I hear from most people is, we like daylight later. Some parents would say that they like daylight earlier because kids are walking to school and things like that. So I think there's certainly arguments on that side of it as well, where standard time would be fine, right? That would be good. Most people unanimously agree that they hate switching their clocks twice a year, which and there's a lot of data. There's a lot of studies that have been done on increases in car crashes, heart attacks, negative health outcomes after switches happen. So anytime we switch our clocks, the next few days there's like an uptick. You can actually see it in a number of bad areas, right? Like whether it's car accidents or, health problems. So that is I think there's no doubt that switching our clocks is not great for our bodies or for our health. But the big debate is, what would you choose? A lot of people would choose daylight time. The problem is, under federal law, California can't do that. We can't run a bill that takes us to permanent daylight saving time. So that's why the standard time always gets proposed, because it's the only one we can do as a state under federal law. Federal law only allows states to go on daylight time for 8 months of the year. And so I don't remember the act, but it's something like, I don't know, maybe it's the Daylight Saving Time Act. I don't remember, but there is a federal preemption to choosing to go on daylight time permanently. And so that's why standard time, Arizona being the main example on the West Coast, is really the only option. So if you want to get rid of the switch, right, without changing federal law, you have to go to standard time.
You have to opt for standard.
And so I think that it'll be an interesting discussion. I think if the goal is just get rid of the switch, I think we got to just
go with standard.
You got to go with this bill. But the fight always becomes like, but I like the daylight. 8 months of the year.
Yeah, I think there may be, people on both sides of this issue here. I don't know. I guess the compromise is to have both.
Well, that's what we have now.
Yeah.
So we already
That's
have the
thing.
compromise.
I know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be interesting because this is not the first time the legislature's had. We've had this discussion probably 4 to 5 times over the last decade in some legislative session. I feel like every session this gets brought up again, and it's always the same fight. It's always the same arguments.
Yeah.
We'll see if this goes anywhere.
I think it's really interesting that it actually has effects on like society and people's activities and stuff. And
for sure. Yeah.
And if we switch to standard, people can adapt.
Exactly.
You know, people can adapt.
Well, that's what I was thinking, because it may seem sort of alarming to us who would be living through that switch, but it wouldn't take too long, I don't think, for people to sort of just adapt to it.
Right. Like if we went to standard time.
Yeah. And maybe you have a more productive morning in that case, and you go to bed earlier and you have less, you know.
Oh,
who knows?
I think like a lot of change, right? People hate change, right? So they hate change maybe to standard time. They also hate changing their clocks.
Yeah.
So either way, you're hating something.
Yeah.
But like, you know, change is always hard. But I mean, Arizona has clearly adapted. Like nothing is, you know, there's not all these problems going on in Arizona because of this.
Yeah.
And, you know, they get to, you know,
I feel like
at the same time.
I'm being won over right
now.
Oh
man. I'm not even trying to convince you. I'm just trying to chat about it. But like, I don't even know honestly where I fall on it, because I get the daylight thing. But I just this might be the only option. And a lot of people will say, well, didn't we vote on this in California? Because there was an initiative on the ballot a few years ago that basically said, what do you think about daylight savings time? And California voters said, you know, we want to end the switch or whatever. But basically all that was, I think it was like, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like an advisory initiative or something that basically said, if Congress ever acts to change this or allow states to change this, you know, we'll change it. But it didn't actually have any real effect. So, anyway.
Got it.
So that's the story on that.
Yeah.
We're going to finish off with our clip of the week. I'm going to play this, let it speak for itself, and maybe we may or may not talk about it. We'll
All right.
Okay.
I know you're friends with Newsom.
Yeah.
We live here, right?
Oh,
we
yes.
live in California. I was born here. In Oakland, they have Kaiser Hospital, where my pediatrician was. The hospital put out a notice last week, employees are not to leave for lunch. It's too dangerous.
Right.
In downtown
Yes,
Oakland. That's on him. Our homeless I don't want to hear that the homeless problem is intractable. You want to be CEO? It's your problem. It's your desk.
Yeah.
I know you like him, but I just think I can't imagine him having the gall to run to lead this country when he's run this state into the ground. When we just had Governor Brown not that long ago, Oakland was safe. Things were going on. It's not good. It's not. He looks very shiny, but he's not a straight shooter, and he's not willing to do the hard things to make this state better. And that's his only job. He doesn't realize that. He thinks it's to go sing Kumbaya with a former Marvelette at New College of Florida to make some big point. Meanwhile, back in our state, people are dying in these encampments.
Well, I'm hoping that running nationally will bring him more to the center.
Okay.
So I cheated on this one a little bit because it's technically a little more than a week old, but I missed it last week, so I wanted to play it because I thought it was interesting. But basically, that's Caitlin Flanagan on the Bill Maher show about a little over a week ago. She is a left-leaning writer for The Atlantic, not exactly a conservative publication, with some pretty, I think, accurate and fair criticisms of the governor. So I thought it was a very interesting clip. You know, I think, you know, the point about Governor Brown, I think Governor Brown definitely was more results oriented. You know, Newsom is a lot of times more about there's a lot of things that he promises, a lot of splashy headlines, but it's oftentimes not a lot of follow through. But I will push back on one of the things she said about Brown is he was actually the one that pushed for Prop 47 and Prop 57 initially. So he didn't actually see any of the effects of it while he was in office because it happened after he left.
Sure.
But I think that is the cause of a lot of, you know, the problems that we're seeing today when it comes to crime, when it comes to safety, when it comes to theft. And but to her point, the governor has to step up now and say, we need to fix this. And that, as the leader of one of the the largest state in the union, he can do that. He can push that. He can show that leadership. I thought it was interesting. But anyway,
yeah, all I'll say is, I'm sure the governor has his hands full, but I think taking ownership is an ideal first step to
Oh yeah,
handling the issues.
Yeah, just own it. I mean, homelessness, crime, retail theft, whatever it is, like current approach is not working.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming back on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
No announcements this week. If you want to share ideas for future shows, you can email pointoforderpod@gmail.com. You can follow or subscribe on YouTube, Twitter, X, Instagram, Facebook, Threads @pointoforderpod. And you can follow me on Twitter @Joshua_Hoover. Thanks again, guys. I appreciate you always filling in when we have a cancellation or just because. So
absolutely,
it was great having you guys on. So
happy to. Thanks again.
Happy to
Thanks
be
for
here.
having us.
All right. See you next time.
See you next time.